Hi there again folks, it's Diane from Spencer Ugg Sewing Patterns, and you probably already know by now that all my sewing patterns are suitable for domestic sewing machines. And this one is suitable for just about any fabric you can put your hands on. This is the Totini Tote. It's a stylish and compact mini tote crossbody bag that combines fashion and functionality with ergonomic handles, a spacious interior and a secure inside zip pocket. It has an optional jaunty little scarf embellishment and also an optional crossbody strap. And it's such a versatile pattern. Make it as a fashionable teeny tote, hence the name Totini. You can add the optional crossbody strap for a crossbody tote, or just add the crossbody strap and leave out the tote handles. Or you can add no straps at all and use it as a cosmetic bag. You can build your own combination. It's designed for ease of construction and there's no binding involved. It's a delightful project for sewing enthusiasts of all skill levels. It's an easy and relatively quick sew with really thorough instructions, and they're provided in both written and video format, so follow whichever you prefer. I also provide you with both printable pattern pieces and also measurements, so you can cut with a quilt rule if you prefer a no print option. This bag is perfect for everyday use or a night out. Dress it up for a wedding or make it casual. It even makes a great gift for little girls. How cute would it be as a mummy and me tote? So let's take a quick look at the features of this bag. The outside features grab handles to front and back to give it its cute shape. You can make these with webbing or fabric, and there's instructions for both included. Or why not make the grab handles longer for an underarm style? The ends are firmly embedded into the feature front and back seam for added strength. You can even make it without the grab handles for a clutch or a cosmetic bag. Plus it has an optional adjustable and detachable crossbody strap, or make with just the detachable strap as a handy crossbody. There's so many looks. I also show you how to make this cute scarf accessory to pimp up any of your bags. It has a strengthened, firm, sturdy base to decorate as you wish, or even add bag feet. It has an easy make box bottom method, so there's no measuring of angles and it goes together like a dream, and the corners are lovely and sharp. To the top is a secure, wide opening zip top closure. And then on the inside, there's a generous main compartment with ample room for your wallet, keys, phone and makeup. It's got a super snug fitted lining, no rumples in here, a secure inside zip pocket for your valuables, and the bag turns through this so there's no unsightly seams in the lining and there's no binding. In the video, as a little extra, I also show you how to add an additional slip pocket to any bag of your choice. The approximate finished dimensions are in centimetres 30 by 18 by 9 deep. In inches, that's 12 by 7 by 3.5 inches. You can even add a separate little Lewis wallet to make a matching set. I do love the Lewis wallet, it's one of my favourites. The testers made loads of these. They found them super quick and satisfying. In this world of unreality, I feel I need to start stating our testers do not use any AI to tweak their photographs. What you're seeing is true photos and true cuteness. Thank you testers, some lovely, lovely samples here. As usual, it's a full written pattern illustrated with lots of colour photographs all the way through, and I provide full-size computer drafted pattern pieces which print onto A4 or US letter size paper. And it has a no print option too, so there's no worries if you don't have a printer or you don't want to print the supplied pattern pieces. You can make it from the easy rectangle measurements given in imperial and metric. Make it in just about any fabric, from quilt cotton to upholstery fabric and vinyl to wax canvas. Use it as a tote, a crossbody, an underarm style or just a clutch. It's the perfect multitasking pattern for making different styles. You can get the pattern on my website now at www.spencerogg.com. It's an instant download PDF and the link is in the text below, or just head to my website directly where you'll find dozens of my bag making patterns in a huge range of designs, all with easy instructions and most now with videos too. Sign up to my newsletter to get all the news on new patterns and freebies as they launch. The Spencerog Facebook group is a hive of bag making knowledge, so please head on over to join. The link is below in the text, just scroll down. Show photos of your makes and ask anything you need to know about my patterns or about bag making in general. I hope you like the Totini tote as much as myself and my testers did. It's so much fun. If you want to make one with me, then just grab the pattern and let's go sew. Thanks for purchasing this Spencerog pattern for the very cute Totini tote bag. You'll find timestamps in the text below this video, so if you scroll down to the text underneath the video, you'll find timestamps and stamps that mean you can just jump from one section to the next. So let's start with what we're going to need for this project, and your quantities for each are given in the PDF document. So first of all, outer fabrics, well, a whole range here. I don't think there's anything you can't use for this one, and then we'll just treat each separately with its own interfacing. But most fabric types, including canvas, quilt cottons, home deck weights, waterproof canvas, cork, vinyl, oilskins, denim, just about anything you fancy trying this in. One of my testers even did a really gorgeous patchwork one, so you can always make up your own fabric with a bit of patchwork first. For your lining, just use a quilt weight cotton. That's absolutely fine. So your interfacing, obviously your interfacing will be different depending on what fabrics you're going to choose. So in the main, you're going to want to interface your cotton base or home deck weight fabrics. So for denim, canvas, quilt cottons, anything home deck weight, we're going to need a firm fusible interfacing. So something like a Decaville Light or a Pelham 525, and that's Decaville Light, not Decaville Heavy. If you can't get hold of that, you can use 2 layers of Pelham SF101, so your woven medium to lightweight interfacing. You can use a double layer of that. So that's on your cotton-based woven fabrics. And you can adhere those to the full fabric. You don't need to cut out at the seam allowances or anything. Most machines won't have any problem sewing through that. If you are worried about it, you can cut those away from your seam allowance if you have an entry-level machine. You'll actually find that Decaville Light is easier to sew through than 2 layers of the regular SF101 because it's actually engineered for the needle to pass through it easily, and that you really don't need to cut out of seam allowances. I've not had a machine that won't sew through anyway, but you might want to look at seam allowances or cutting it away from the corners if you have got an entry-level machine. Okay, so that is our interfacings for our outer on cottons and upholstery weights, this type of fabric. You don't need any interfacing for your firm fabrics such as waterproof canvas, cork, firm vinyl, waxed canvas, oilskin. No interfacing required on those at all. But feel free to play around with interfacings. You can add a little fleece if you want a squidgy finish to a bag, but avoid foam or Decaville Heavy. They're just a bit too firm for this small size of bag. Today I'm going to be using Mora faux leather or vinyl. And that is quite a flexible, I don't want to say limp because we like it, it's quite a flexible vinyl, unlike some of our heftier weight ones. These definitely, you don't need any interfacing on these, but if you are using a much limper, more bendable one, you can add a little interfacing to the back. So today I've literally just added a little bit to the front and back piece A. I've added some Decaville Light and I've cut it a bit smaller just in case. These are all just in case scenarios. You can see I've just cut a centimetre or the seam allowance less in there. But in general, you don't really need it with full leathers and vinyls. In fact, it would be perfectly fine without. I just fancied a bit of a firmer bag for this today. Interfacing for your lining fabrics. So we're just going to use quilt cotton on our linings. So all you need on that is a light to medium weight, such as Vilene F220 or Pelham SF101. So it can be woven or non-woven, just that lighter weight. And the final thing is a little bit of stiffener for the bag base. So I am using an ultra heavyweight interfacing and I'm using Decaville Heavy. But you can also try Pelham 71 too. So let's have a look at the hardware we're going to need for the bag. So we're also going to need 2 zips, a number 5 zip for the outer and a number 3 zip for the lining pocket. So you can choose those matching or contrast, whichever you want. We're using the number 5 for the outer because it's more attractive with its bigger teeth. It doesn't matter if you use a number 3, you don't have to adjust anything, but the number 5 will probably look better. So we're choosing nylon coil zips because we're going to sew over them. So we don't want metal and we don't want waterproof zips. We're going to be trimming the length to fit. So always choose the nylon coil. So this, although it's metal look, is still nylon. And choose zips that are given length in the PDF document or longer. So whether they're fixed or continuous, choose them at the length given or slightly longer. And we're going to trim them to fit. So other things we're going to need is a metal zip end to finish off the zip. Quick and easy to attach. We're going to need some webbing. So we need webbing for the grab handles and webbing for the optional crossbody strap. So I've used a width of 32mm or 1¼ inches because I think the scale works best with this bag. But you can use any width that you choose or you've got in stock. Now I find cotton and nylon seatbelt webbing are ideal for this project. The polyester webbing tends to crease up a bit. You can make the grab handles in fabric if you prefer, and I'm going to be doing that today. I've also included a 3/4 inch webbing, so you can choose to use that or not, and I've used that for my strap carriers, just because it keeps the bulk down when you're stitching it into the side seam. So if you've got a lower powered machine, I would always choose a webbing for your carriers, and that's a 3/4 inch webbing. I'll be making mine today though, because I wanted to match my lining, and I didn't have one that matched exactly. So if you add in the crossbody strap, you are going to need 2 D-rings in 3/4 inch width, and that will match my 3/4 inch webbing on my strap carriers when I make them out of fabric. You'll also need 1 adjuster buckle and 2 swivel clasps. So both of those I've chosen at 1¼ inch to match my webbing. If you're using a different width of webbing, just choose that slider and swivel clasp to match the width of your webbing, but don't change the width of your D-rings. Your D-rings are going to stay at 3/4 inch, whatever, because that's about the size of the bag and the sides and the opening at the side. So stick with the 3/4 inch D-rings. We also have an optional mini scarf embellishment, and if you want to add one of those, I've used a 1 inch gate ring to attach it. That's one of these babies here. If you haven't got one of those, you can use a split ring, or you can just tie the scarf onto the grab handles itself, no problem. Optionally, you can also add a metal badge to the outside or a branded badge, and you can use a logo tab inside, and we'll attach that to the lining. I'm using 100% polyester thread to match, or you could use a contrast, whichever you prefer. And I use 100% polyester, such as Gutterman Sew-All. And polyester is much stronger than a cotton thread for bag making, so I'd always choose a polyester. So that's everything we're going to need, so let's move on to printing and cutting out. So the cutting chart and the pattern pieces can be found at the end of the PDF document, so if you scroll right to the end you'll find them all there. And for those who prefer to cut straight lines with a ruler and a rotary cutter, well, measurements for the printable pattern pieces are also included on the cutting chart. Don't mix the two though, in case your printer has scaled anything slightly. And if you're checking the pattern pieces, the measurements are as per the inch measurements quoted. So open your document with Adobe Reader. You've probably already got it, but if not, there's a link in the PDF document to download it for free. Print off your pattern sheets, making sure the box actual size or 100% is ticked, and there's nothing ticked that says shrink to fit or fit to page. We don't want your printer reducing the size of the pattern. There's a measured control box on the printed pattern. I think it's the first page of the pattern pieces, so just print the first page off with this on and measure to check that it's printing at the right size before you print the rest of the pieces. So each page is marked with its description, Cut out and tape together as instructed on the pattern pieces if you need to. There's just the odd couple, I think, in this one. So you'll see A1, A2, form piece A, and you'll see a red line, and I'll say tape to A2 along this line, tape to A1 along this line. So pretty self-explanatory, I think. Now within the PDF document, I've got lots of separate mini tutorials linked in there. So you can just click on them and see more information if you need it for anything or any extra help. So there's things like help with opening and printing PDF patterns, broad look at choosing suitable fabrics for bag making, help with accurately cutting fabrics or attaching zips straight. So you can just delve down into those if you actually want them. A few tips for this pattern before we start. Just to save a bit of paper, you'll see a dotted line on piece B on the one end there. And that indicates that our lining is going to be slightly smaller, and we're going to trim the lining down once we get to that point, or once we get to that stage. So you don't need to do anything as yet, just that's what that line is for, the dotted line. And that will help the lining fit really snugly inside the bag. If you are using a directional fabric, it should look the same direction as the writing on the paper pattern pieces. So you can leave your paper pattern pieces pinned or clipped to your cut pieces, or you can use the handy labels that are also in there and just attach those just to identify your cut pieces. Throughout construction, do backstitch at the beginning and end of every seam. Trim loose threads as you go, press at every stage for a smart finish, and if you're using vinyl like me, use a pressing cloth or press from the back so you don't want to burn or melt your vinyl. And follow the instructions on a screen on your device rather than printing out all the instructions as well. You only need to print the pattern pieces. You can follow the instructions on screen or indeed follow the video tutorial. So go ahead and cut and fuse all your pieces as directed on the cutting chart, and when you're ready, we'll make a start. The seam allowance is 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch throughout, unless otherwise stated, and it is included in the pattern pieces. You don't need to add anything else on. So if you're ready, let's go. So our first operation is to make the grab handles. In the PDF instructions, I show you how to use webbing or fabric, and I've photographed using webbing. So today I'm going to use the fabric option. So you want to take the 2 grab handles, pieces F. The measurements are in the cutting chart, and it's a strip to cut with a ruler. So if you carry on down the cutting chart, it's lower to the bottom. There's an optional strip to cut with a ruler. It's not a paper pattern piece. So you've got 2 of these. Flip it to the back and draw a line in the centre, or fold along the centre, whichever you prefer. If you're using cotton fabrics, you can just go to the ironing board and fold this in place. So fold or draw a line along the centre, open it out again, and then fold the edges in to meet that centre line. Obviously you can do all this at the ironing board if it's a fabric that will take a crease and not melt. But obviously this is vinyl, so I don't want to be going anywhere near it with an iron if I can help it. So just folding those in to the centre. And then I'll fold that in half again to enclose the raw edges in the middle and clip it in place. Obviously you can use double-sided tape if that's your thing. I prefer to keep my double-sided tape for when I need it most, which is usually inserted zips. There we go, and then clip into place or press it into place. So I've matched those edges exactly. No raw edges. Now I'm going to top stitch along both long edges, both long sides of the strap, 3mm or 1/8 inch from the edge. You can put a blind hemming foot on your machine if it makes things easier. I've put one on. I use it all the time. I'm not proud. And I've put a microtex needle on my machine because I'm stitching vinyl. I use a longer stitch length for top stitching than I would for sewing the seams. In this case, I think I've mentioned before, my machine isn't great once it goes over a stitch length of 3, so I tend to stop it there. So I'm just using a 3 on here. But if you've got a machine that does beautiful long stitches, then go with your beautiful long stitches. So that's my strap top stitched. I'll do the same with the other one. I've already clipped that in place just to save a bit of time. So there's both my straps. Make sure they're identical in length. Now I do demo in the written instructions an option to fold these again at the top edge, but I would only do that if I was using webbing in general, because these are going to become a bit bulky. But just refer to the instructions if you want to know how to do that. So let's start on our outer panels. So I'm going to take both front and back outer pieces A. And you'll note I've actually added my badge already just to save time, because I wanted to make a meal of it. It'd take me forever when I'm measuring things, so I've just done that first. So flip them to the back. I'm going to draw a line on each, 4.5 centimetres or 1 3/4 inches from the top. So if you are using a directional print or you've got a badge on, make sure that that is the distance from the top, not the bottom. So I've marked those on. I'm now going to cut along those lines with a rotary cutter. You don't actually have to draw them on, you can just cut straight away. But, you know, I like to double check and check, make sure they're the same on both. You know, it's that old adage, cut once, twice. What is it? Measure twice, cut once. That's the one. So let's cut along there. Better stand up. Move it up there so I can get my hand in. That's one. Do the second one. So make sure that's nice and straight. We can't afford to get any zigzaggy things in there. So we've just created an upper outer and a lower outer, front and back. So you can decorate this however you want. So if you want to put some decoration on there, you want to put some badges on there, you know now where your handles are going to lie. This is going to be a seam. So if you want to put some decoration on here or whatever you want, you can do. So we'll attach our first grab handle. So I'll use the back to start. I'll put that to one side. So remember, if you're using a print that matches in any way, make sure it's looking correct. You haven't got it turned upside down, either one of them. So we're going to attach our first grab handle. So I do only need the lower outer panel for this. So I'll just put that down there for now. But I'll remember it's the right way up. Not that it matters with the faux, but I have got some interfacing on the back that I want to keep in the same position. So I'm going to grab a ruler. So my first lower outer is face up, and I want to position the free ends of my grab handle 9 centimetres or 3.5 inches in from each outer edge. So I'm going to make a little mark at that point. Obviously use chalk or something that's you can get rid of afterwards. I'm just using this ballpoint pen so you can see it. 9 centimetres or 3.5 inches is there. So all your measurements are in the document as well, so keep referring to that so you've got it in front of you. So I'm going to lay the first grab handle on top of the edge of the lower outer, positioning the free ends 9 centimetres or 3.5 inches, that little mark, in from the outside edge. So that's the outside of my handle. It's not the middle, it's not that way, it's the outside. I'm going to position it there on that mark, the handles towards the centre, and I'm going to leave 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimetres overhang at the top, and this will add strength inside the bag, or when you're carrying great hefty weights around afterwards. Yeah, so that's one. And then I'm going to bend that round, come up here, same again, 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimetres overhang, and I've positioned the edge of the handle on that mark. I'm not going to the inside of the handle, it's the outside of the handle. Just to let you know, if you do it the other way, if you do it this way, the more you spread it out, the shorter your handle's going to get. So if you did want them to be spread further apart, you would need to increase the length of your handle. So stick with the measurements that I've given in the pattern to the outside of the handles. And that's my 3/4 inch, 2 centimetre overhang. Clip in place. And now I'll base those in place within the seam allowance. So my seam allowance is 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch throughout, so I just want to base them less than that, so 1/2 centimetre. Anything that's safe within the distance. Once we've finished, those will flip up over the top. So that's basted in place. So then I'm going to take my upper outer piece again. So my lower outer piece is right side uppermost. I'm going to take my upper outer piece and lay it right side uppermost above it. Just make sure that your print is all lying in the right direction. Nothing's changed. In my case, I've got a bit of interfacing at the bottom and not at the zip edge. So once I'm happy that I know it's in the right direction, I'm then going to flip it down so it's right sides together. So I'm matching up the long bottom edge of the upper outer with the long top edge of the lower outer. I'm going to clip that in place. So right sides together in there. Handles dropping down inside. 3/4 inch or 2 centimetres of the handle sticking up here, and the handle was positioned at the marks, so the handle is inside the marks, not outside the marks. Okay, and then I'm going to stitch across there with 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance. You can add a second line of stitching too, just for extra strength, just inside the first. Just make sure that handle is exactly straight as you go in over the top. So I've done a second line of stitching for extra strength just inside the seam allowance, so that's not going to show. So I'm now going to open that out, flip it over to the back, and we want a handle pointing upwards, and we want our nubs of the strap and the seam allowance facing downwards. If you push that upwards, it's going to push your handles down on the other side, so we absolutely don't want that. We want the seam allowance pushed away and down, and the nubs of the handles too. So take that to the ironing board and give it a press if you're using cotton fabrics or fabrics suitable for pressing. And then hold that in place, flip it over, and then top stitch the main body panel 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the edge through the lower body and through those seam allowances. So I've got my longer stitch length again for top stitching. Make sure your straps are up and your seam allowances are down. And I'm going to stitch 2 lines of stitching, one at the 3mm and then one just fraction larger than that to give the effect of twin needle, but that is completely optional. So I will go ahead and do my second panel now. That's me stitched up. I'm going to change my needle first because I can see there's a few little white marks in there, which probably means that my needle's not too sharp anymore and it's pulling through some of the backing. So I'll just change the needle and then do my second side. So let's do our second side. Just before I baste those on, I'm going to check its identical positioning to my first. Lay them on top just to make sure. So yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so I'll baste those in place. Place my upper outer face down on top. Clip and stitch at 1 centimetre seam allowance. Press that open again, handle upwards on the front, seam allowances down on the back, and then stitch in place with 1 or 2 lines of stitching, top stitching. And that dreadful top stitching, look, I haven't kept it even at all. However, that narrow bit will be around the sides when I've finished. Nobody will know. So that is my front and back panels completed. If you haven't added any badges already, you can do that now if you prefer. And we're ready to prepare the back base. So now we're going to prepare the back base. So you've got piece B, base for outer and lining, so we just want the outer portion. Put your lining to one side for now. And you've also got a base stiffener cut out in ultra firm fusible. So I've used Decovil Heavy, and I've already fused that centrally to the back of my base panel. So you can see there's a border without interfacing all the way around, just to aid my stitching, make things less bulky. So you can decorate the base however you want. You can just leave it plain, you don't have to decorate it, or you could have rivets, bag feet, add some stitching on there, some stitch lines, quilt lines, anything you like. You could also make your base in a contrast colour, which does look really nice. So for example, on there, I've just added some lines of stitching on there. It just gives it a pop of colour. Or you can leave it plain like this. I've left it the same colour as the outer for this one because I want it quite a subdued sort of handbag. So I'll just add some decoration to this. There we are. I've just added a few lines of stitching. That'll just cheer it up a bit. I'm going to flip that over and I'm going to mark the centre points. I've already done it here in a bit of pen. So the centre points are both long edges, and I'm also going to draw a line 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch from the end of both short edges. Now it's easy to see on this because I've put the Decovil on there, but I shall draw it on anyway, just so you can really see it easily. And then I'll grab my outer front and back panels, and I'm going to mark the centre of both on these two, the bottom centre. I've put a little notch in there because I'm going to be looking at it from the front, so it's easier if I put a little notch in there. So we'll start with the front panel. I'm going to lay the outer front right side up. So if you've got a badge on there, it's that one. You trim that up. And I'm going to lay my base panel right side down on top, lining up my centre marks. There's my centre snip and there's my centre mark. Clip it in place in the middle, and then I am going to measure it both sides just to make sure it is really, really central, because this is important. Yeah, that's perfect. So finish clipping that. Now, if you didn't already draw that line at the seam allowances at the end, 1 centimetre from the end or 3/8 of an inch from the end, make sure you draw that now. And then I'm going to stitch across this base panel at my seam allowance of 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch from that long edge. all the way across, but I'm going to stop and start at these 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch lines. And that is important because it's going to give us a really neat finish. The more accurate that start and stop point, the better the bag will fit together when boxing the corners at the end. So there we are. I've stopped and I've started at that 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch line. So I'm going to lift up that base panel and just snip into the seam allowance of the outer front at the point I started and stopped. So you can transfer that over. There's your stop point, or in fact you can see it. Kind of bend it back, it's there. Make a little line. There's my 1 centimetre. There. So I'm going to snip my outer all the way up from the bottom to where I've started or stopped stitching on either side. I'll do that and then show you. So lift up. I'll show you that. So lift it up, it's there. So I haven't snipped the base, I've just snipped the outer. What it'll allow us to do is bend it. When we get there, it will bend round better. So now I'm going to repeat to the outer back. So grab your outer back panel, lay face up, make sure your centre notch is showing. And then open this out, put your base panel right side down, match up the notches or the marks. Give it an extra measure. In fact, you should check at this point that the edges are matching up. So we can still measure it to make sure it's central, but look, these side seams are going to be matching up exactly now anyway, or should be. So that looks fine. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to stitch from the line to the line on each side, and then we'll snip it again. And that was at my full seam allowance of 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. So we'll lift that up again and give it a snip. You can actually see it on that side. If you turn it over, you can see where you stitched to. So we can do it from that side as well. That makes it maybe slightly easier to see, but we're only snipping the outer, not the base panel. There we are. So that's all done. Looking good. Got to snip that. That's because I didn't snip the ends off, the thread ends, and then you can never get in them afterwards. But there we go, looking nice. You can sort of fold it up and get an idea of what it's going to look like. That's going to make a really cute little handbag. And now we're ready to attach the zip. So let's prepare our zip. Put that to one side for a sec and grab your outer zip, your number 5 zip. So here's my number 5 zip. I'm using continuous zip, so it doesn't matter if it's fixed length or continuous. I'm going to chop it off, so it makes no difference whatsoever. So I'm going to draw a line at the open end about 1 inch from the edge. About 1 inch, it doesn't matter exactly. This is just so we can fold it back to make a nice neat end. You just want to make sure those marks are the same on both sides. So at this mark, we're going to fold the zip tape back on itself at 90 degrees, so the teeth angle outwards, and then I'll pin them and tack them. So at that line we've just drawn, I'm going to fold and tuck the zip tape back behind. Put a pin in and I can show you closer. There we are. See that? So we're just angling the zip at 90 degrees, but the one behind the top section is going behind the one on top, so you're not going to see that fold when you've got it stitched into the bag. So again on this side, kind of pinching along that line, pulling it up as you bend the teeth over. I think you've probably all done this dozens of times by now, if not millions. Okay, there we are. So I'll just stitch on the outside edge of the tape. I'm just basting to hold it in place, to put it in the bag. So we want it close to the edge so we don't see it once the zip's stitched in. I have put a zipper foot on my machine already. Oh, if I didn't mention before, by the way, all the notions that I use in this video, so zips and webbing and everything else, are linked below in the text. So you can follow the links to where I've bought them from, and there's worldwide links usually to most things. So that's my zip ready to go in. You can see once that's into the bag, it'll just disappear. The end will just disappear in. And it's nice, tucked in and secure. I've secured the other end of the zip with a bit of a Y zigzag stitch. You could use a couple of staples just so you don't accidentally pull the zip puller off later. So we're going to attach that to the first side of the bag, or the outer. Grab your bag. Let's do the front first. And the first thing I'm going to do is make a mark on the top edge, 4 centimetres or 1.5 inches in from the edge on both sides. So I've already done it here. You can see that little pen mark. So I'll do that top and bottom, back and front. So 4 centimetres or 1.5 inches. Little mark, just so you can see it, and that's on the front, on the right side of the fabric. Okay, so do that in chalk or disappearing pen. Obviously, as I say, I'm only using ballpoint so you can see it. So I'm going to take my zip. Now we want it opening left to right. So when it's closed, pull it to the left when you're attaching it to the front of the bag. That is the standard way to do it. I know some people like it the other way around, which is absolutely fine. There's no real right or wrong way, but the standard is left to right. So that's the way I'll do it. I always do it. I'll try and do it for tutorials. Don't always get it right, obviously. Okay, so we're going to flip that over so it's right side down. I'm going to pull that handle down out of the way, and I'm going to position this bend of the zip exactly on that mark. So I'm lining up the zip tape with the top edge of the bag, but where the bend is and the teeth go upwards, I'm going to match it to the mark on there. Clip on place, clip on place, clip in place. So I'll put a couple of clips in just there and then open it so you can see better. The reason we have that distance, by the way, is because you've got your D-ring going in there. Your bag's going to curve around and you've got your D-ring going in there. Even if you're not putting a crossbody strap in, it needs to curve around, so you don't want your zip going all the way to the end. So let's open that so you can see properly. Keep that down there. So I'm going to clip that all the way along the top edge. I've ironed my zip, or pressed my zip first, by the way, because that does help a lot. Because you go and press it, you stitch it on and then press it afterwards, and it could shrink. So you're much better off pressing it beforehand. It does make a big difference. Always press zips. So you can use double-sided tape if you prefer, that's no problem. So I'm going to carry on clipping all the way along until I get to this second mark. And at the second mark, I'm going to pull my zipper downwards away from the raw edge, so it veers downwards towards the body of the bag. So let me grab a clip. So let me clip it in place and then show you. I'm going to clip it at the side here just to hold it in place. So you can see that. There's my mark under there. So just when we get to that mark, I'm going to pull the zip downwards. So when I stitch along, I'm going to carry on stitching, but the zip will then drop away from the stitching and my stitching will carry along here. So using a zipper foot, I'm going to stitch the zip in place all the way across the top edge with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can see, I take that off now, you can see how that zip drops away. I've pulled it down The stitching continues across all the way. That's not changing from its seam allowance of 6mm or 1/4 inch. That's all the way across, but the zip is then pulled down out of the way. That means it'll pop out afterwards. So let's attach the second side. So let's turn the bag around. Make sure you've got your marks on there. I'm going to zip it up at this point because I just want to make sure that everything matches up to start with. So right side uppermost. Add your marks if you haven't already added them. Lift this outer front with your zip attached and lay it on top of your outer back. So you've got the right sides together. And we want to match, again, that same angled zip end with your notch on the bag or your mark on the bag. So push your handles down again. Don't want those in the way. Let me put a clip in and I shall show you. So I've clipped that in the same position. So at my mark again, just where those angled teeth are. So I want to do that with my bag closed just to make sure everything lines up. So when that's attached and the zip's closed, are my side seams or the edges of my bag equal, you know, laying in the same place on both sides? Because at the moment you can still move that zipper clip, but you can see that they're lining up together on the edge there. Okay, so I can undo the zip and I can clip it all the way across now. So keep your handle out of the way and clip in position. And once you get to that notch or mark, just drop your zip again. So there's my notch, my mark. So I'm going to angle my zipper or veer my zipper down at that point. So I'll just clip it at the side so you can see it first. So the same again, veer down at that mark. So now I'm going to start from this side. I'm going to stitch across with 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance again from this side. So I'll be moving across like this. Trimity trim. And then we're probably about halfway through this bag. It's quite a nice, easy one. I think it's a nice, gentle sew. So, if we're about halfway through, you know what time that is.
Diane, here is your reminder. It's time for a tea break.
Okay, it's tea break time. Now, confession. There are no kids living in our house anymore, which means the biscuit tin has become, well, a bit obsolete. So I've just been rummaging for something to show you during filming, and this is what I found. Yep, that's it. The last lonely sweet in the house. Got 3. That's pathetic, isn't it? If only Werther's originals were really that big, right? Anyway, I hope you're enjoying stitching up this cute little tote with me. Let me tell you how this pattern came about. I was actually off to a wedding and I desperately needed an orange bag to go in my outfit. So I thought, oh, I'll just shrink down the tip-top tote pattern. That'll be really easy. Except I ended up changing pretty much everything about it. So here's the baby I made. This was my first sample. But at the wedding, I got so many compliments on it that I thought, you know what? This would be a good pattern to share. So, click me, of course, though. The bag didn't make it into a single wedding photograph. So, just for you, here's a picture of the bag, just so I can show you my outfit. Right then, enough chit-chat. Let's finish this little tote.
Diane, here is your reminder. Diane, get back to work immediately.
Now it's time to join our side seams. So I'm going to close the zip, make sure nothing is twisted. You'll have to tuck those handles inside for now. I can see some threads, didn't pay attention. They'll only end up sticking out later where I can't get them. In fact, you know what you can do? You can singe the end of those zips if you want to as well. We're not going to cut them off right to the end because there's no need, so we can just singe them a little bit. That'll stop them fraying. It's not a necessity, but it's just something you can do if you want to for extra security. Okay, so zip up and then match the side seams. So we're ignoring the base. Nothing is happening with the base. We're just matching those side seams and clipping in place from top to bottom. Another thread. What have I been doing? I'm not paying attention. It's one and the other one match. Matchy match. Okay, so that's both side seams. You can do that zip now if you want to. It doesn't matter, just whatever's easiest for you. We just want to make sure that everything's lying matched up and central, and those side seams are lying on top of each other. So I'm going to stitch down both sides with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to keep that zip tail well out of the way. I don't want to stitch over that. You might have to fold your base in half depending how thick it is. I'm going to grab a hump jumper because you can see how my foot, I'm not sure if you can see, my foot is just stuck up quite a lot when I'm going over that seam. It's because we've got a seam on both sides, so if you just add that under your foot at the back, that'll help you get it over, and you can always add it at the front as well if you need to once you're over the hump. That's because I've got the extra layer of Decaville with vinyl. Same again. So now we're ready to box the bottom of the outer. So basically all we're doing is pushing the sides in to meet that base. So open up your side seams, press them if you can. I'm going to put a clip on it for me because I can't press it, and I want to make sure that that is open when I sew it. So I'm literally just matching that bottom edge with the side. So put it flat, hopefully you can see it there. Let me put a couple of clips in and be able to see it better. So you can see our base is flat and open. You see that? And then because we added those little slits to the side of the outer front and back, it's now bending round, so that seam allowance will lie flat onto the base. So we're now just going to stitch with a 1 centimetre seam allowance or 3/8 of an inch from edge to edge of that, and we'll just be catching in at the corners on each side. So hold that seam allowance down and open too. Now so I'm stitched, so make sure you're stitching right into that corner. Get rid of that. Just stitching right into that corner there. We don't want to move away from that corner because you'll get a hole. You need to be right on the corner, stitching from edge to edge. So let's do the same with the other side. Open it out, match it up, lie it flat. Get some clips in. And then again, stitch from corner to corner with a 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can also do a second line of stitching on both of those just for security. So just within the seam allowance, just slightly beyond your first. Okay, there we are. That's our bottom boxed. A very pretty body. So I'm not trimming any seam allowances, we don't need to. Now we're going to look at our strap carriers. So this is our optional strap carriers for if you want to add a crossbody strap. So if you're not adding a crossbody strap, you don't need to add these in. So you put that to one side for now. I'm actually going to clip those top seam allowances open, give them a chance to mould into that position. As I say, give them a press if you're using fabric. Okay, put those to one side. So let's add our strap carriers for the optional crossbody strap. So if you're not adding the crossbody strap, you don't need to add these carriers. So I chose 19mm or 3/4 of an inch D-rings for this bag, as I want them to be small and unobtrusive because the bag is small. If we put huge D-rings on, they're going to hang off the side and drag the bag down. So use nice small D-rings. And it doesn't matter what width your strap is, you can use whatever, however wide you want as a strap, because your clasps are just going to dangle from this bit here. So your D-rings could be any width you want. So 19mm or 3/4 of an inch for me on this one. So I mentioned right at the beginning, you can use webbing or you can use fabric for the strap carriers. Webbing is probably better because it keeps the bulk to an absolute minimum. But I didn't have any matching, and actually I quite fancied the lining for the carriers on this, so I'm using fabric. So take your 2 strap carrier pieces G. Now, just a note, they are listed under pieces to cut with the ruler at the bottom of the cutting chart. They're not a paper pattern piece. So I've already folded them up, but basically if you start with them open, draw a line down the middle and then fold the edges in to meet that centre line. That's it. We're not folding them again. People get confused with that and then tell me that they can't attach them to the bag because there's too much bulk, but we don't fold them again. It's not like a strap. This is a strap carrier because we're going to be folding it in half there. So the last thing we want is another layer. So that's going to hide all our raw edges just by doing that. So we're literally just folding the edges in, nothing more. And then you can top stitch along the edge of both of those. Some very uneven top stitching there because I put my zipper foot on already because I want to get that metal work, a stitch close to that metal work, so I couldn't see what I was doing. So we top stitch badly, nobody will notice. Thread your D-rings onto there, fold them in half. So that's it. Our raw edges have disappeared. There's no need to fold those again. And then I'm going to stitch as close to the D-ring as I possibly can. So as I say, I've put a zipper foot on my machine already. So you can stitch at the end as well if you want, but as long as you've got a line close to here, because we don't want the D-ring slipping down when it's on the bag. You could also put a dot of glue under there. I've started doing that. It works quite well. Right, so that's my strap carriers complete. And I can attach those to my bag now. So let's grab our bag again. So centre the first strap carrier at the top of one side seam with the D-ring facing downwards. Right, let me show you on this side first because it's easier to see. So I'm going to centre that on the side seam with the D-ring facing downwards onto the body of the bag, and I'm going to leave a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch overhang at the top. So the strap carrier is going to overhang the top of the bag by 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. It gives us extra strength. We can put an extra stitch in it later, but the more that's inside the bag, the stronger that'll be, especially if we're stitching it afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to base that in place. I'll do the other one first. So open my zip fully, keep my zip well out of the way. D-ring into bag, 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch above the top. There, you see, zip is completely out of the way. And then I'll baste those in place. So you can do it either from inside the bag, or you can do it from outside the bag, whichever way you choose. If it's a small bag, it's easier to take the footbed off and kind of do it inside. However, you don't all have, not everybody has the ability to remove that, so you can just stitch it from the inside of the bag as well. Or even turn the bag inside out. Do it that way if you prefer. I'll do one that way so you can see. That's from the inside of the bag. I should have taken my zipper foot off again, but I haven't yet. So that's my carriers attached, ready to have the crossbody strap attach them when we're finished. Trim up, and then we can start on the lining. So let's start our lining. So first we're going to prepare our lining to ensure we have a really snug fit. So to help that, we're going to trim the front and back lining pieces C and the lining piece B, the base, before joining them together. So I've got piece C here and piece B here. And you'll notice the dotted lines on these. So I've got C out ready, so I'll do that first. So you can see the trim lines. Basically, it's just 1/4 of an inch off the bottom of each, but leaving the top edge as it is, just so it narrows into the bag and there's no bagginess in the bottom of the lining. But we're finished. So make sure you're all stacked perfectly on top of each other. Make sure that if you have a directional print, you are definitely the right way up. I'm going to turn that around to do the other side because otherwise I won't be able to see it properly. And then I'll grab a bit of chalk, and before I take that paper pattern piece away, I'm going to mark an X on the bottom of both of those pieces, just so I remember that that's the bottom. You can write bottom in anything just to remind you. I mean, we can see that it's narrower now, but it isn't always that obvious when you're busy with other things. So place that to one side for a sec, grab your piece B. So we're just trimming along. Just trimming along that dotted line. So that's 1/2 an inch we're taking from there because we've taken 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of each of those, which equates to 1/2 an inch. So let's do that. You don't have to cut your paper pattern piece, you can just measure it. Yeah. Oh, it's typical it hasn't gone through. Cut the paper and not the fabric. Typical. Yep. So that's done. So grab those pieces. So we're going to put the base to one side for the moment. And we're going to work on one of the front and back linings. So it's going to be the back lining because we're going to put a zip in it. So just take one of your pieces. And again, I'm going to slice across this because we're going to put the zip in here across the top. So make sure you've got your X to your bottom, the narrow to the bottom, and then we're going to measure 4.5 centimetres or 1 3/4 inches from the top. Did that harder. Didn't want to miss doing it this time. There we go. Now, if you do want to add a woven label, you can put one on here, just below where the zip's going to lie. Give it an inch down or a couple of centimetres down so you're out of the seam, but you can pop one on there. So now I'm going to grab my number 3 nylon zip and I'm going to trim it to a length of 20 centimetres or 8 inches. All these measurements are in your PDF document. It's quite short, actually. This is a really long zip, so make sure that you've got no metal ends or fixed ends on there after you've finished. I'm going to measure it without the puller and then pull it back. So before you cut it, make sure your puller's within that 20 centimetres. scissors. So you can run over the ends if you like, just to make sure that you're not going to lose your zip puller anywhere. It does actually help to hold the open ends together as well while you're stitching the tabs on in a minute. Just changing my foot back to regular. And grab your zip tab pieces each. Should have 4 of those. Just to note, they are listed under pieces to cut with a ruler. They're not a paper pattern piece, they're just little strips. So we want 2 of those to start with. And I'm going to place them with the right sides together to each end of the tab with the zip sandwiched between the 2. So let's just move that out of the way for a minute. Keep it the right way up. So I want my zip tabs to be right sides together on top of each other, but I want that zip sandwiched between the 2 inside. So it's going in there, right to the end. It's not coming up here yet, it's going right to the very end of those tabs. And we'll put that in place. And I'm going to stitch that with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance. We'll do the same with this side. So I'll get my 2 zip tabs. I'm going to have them right sides together, but I want that zip sandwiched in the middle, and it's going right to the end of the tabs. So the tabs are coming over the zip and concealing it. Stitch with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Trim, and then we're going to open up those tabs to reveal the zip. Ta-da! Press those in place. I'll press those in a minute. And then we're just going to baste over the ends here just to hold it in place. We're not top stitching here at the moment. So just basted them so they stay in place. And that's plenty of room there to be able to insert it into our lining. Bring that back into view. Just think that will fit in there nicely. So I'm going to trim that zip, or the zip tabs, to the same width as the zip. You don't have to, but it helps you to sort of line that up when you come to put it in, because you're going to be lining up that top edge. You don't want to all of a sudden go, oh, I'm trying to get that in. So if you make sure that the tabs are exactly the same width as the zip itself. I've made them wider in case you used a number 5 zip rather than a number 3. So you do need to trim them down a bit, but just so it's flowing nice and straight and the same width all the way along. I'll probably use a quilt ruler, but so I'm going to mark the centre point of my zip with chalk. So I want the centre point of the zip. I don't want to fold the whole thing in half, just in case your tabs aren't even. Find the centre point of the actual zip. Yep. And the centre point of your lining as well. Just fold it in half to find the centre point. We haven't got a lot of spare on these tabs anyway, but sometimes you get loads of spare on the tabs and you're not quite sure where to position it. So if you mark the centre of the zip and the centre of the lining, you'll know that it's going to be in the right position. So we want our zip opening left to right again. So with the zip closed, we want it to the left-hand side of the lining. So with your lower back lining right side uppermost, lay your zip face down on top, pull it to the left when closed, matching those centre points and clip in place. I'm going to open that a tiny bit. And then just so we add our pocket bag or pocket lining in there at the same time, I'm going to grab one of my lining zip pocket pieces D. Again, I'm going to mark the centre point just by folding it in half. And I'm going to place that right side down on top, matching that centre point again. So we're right sides together. And then clip that in place. So all three are together. I'll have to grab that. I can't do it upside down. There's only so many things you can do upside down without looking at them. Okay, so that's all in place. Let me put that down there for now. So it's all in position, right sides facing, zip sandwich in the middle. And I'm going to stitch across the whole top edge with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. I need to put my zipper foot back on the machine. So I'm stitching from edge to edge, not just the pocket section, all the way from end to end, with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to flip that pocket over to the back to expose the zip. And I'm going to take that to the ironing board and give it a press, just so it's all nice and neatly in place. So that's nicely pressed. You see the pocket on the back, the wrong sides together. So now we're going to top stitch just underneath here, 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from the seam. Nicely top stitched. Trim any excess zip tabs. I've got none. Must have cut them a bit short in the first place. And then I'm going to take my upper lining and lay that above. Make sure it's in the right orientation. If you used a Prym, it will be slightly narrower on that bottom side than the top because of the way you trimmed it. So I've got the lower lining right side up. Upper lining is right side up, but I'm going to flip that down on top so it's right sides together and match up those two long straight edges. So I'm going to baste across that whole top edge with a 6mm 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to flip it over. So that remains folded down, back behind. I'll flip it over, I'm going to get my remaining piece D lining zip pocket. And I'm going to place that right side down on top of the other one, but line it up with the top edge. So you will have a little bit of the original pocket sticking down there. That's fine, that's what we want. This is the bit you can never find your zip to unzip it and turn it off. And then I'm stitching across the whole top edge with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. Trim up, and then we'll flip it back to the other side. In fact, before we do that, we're going to trim the length of that pocket to match the other one. So we've got a little bit of excess pocket we're going to need to stitch along there. So let's just trim that down. But then before I forget to do it, I'm going to press a hem on the bottom of that pocket on both pieces, like that. So I'll take that to the ironing board now. And while I'm there, I'm going to press this upper lining away as well. There we are, I've pressed my hem on the bottom edge of both pieces of the pocket lining, or the pocket bag. And then on the other side, I've pressed the upper lining away from the lower lining to open up my whole back lining piece. Don't want to forget to do that because that's where we're turning the bag through at the end. Right, so flip it over to the front. and lift the lower lining panel to expose the pocket underneath. So you can see what you've done. We want to now stitch the sides of that, and the easiest way to do it without anything moving is just to lift one side and clip it in place. And you can lift the whole thing up, but sometimes it shifts a little bit, so I tend to just lift the side up and do that. So at least I've got it clipped then in position. So I'm going to stitch the side seams of the pocket only using a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to start stitching at the bottom of the pocket bag or pocket lining. Stitch all the way to the top, just as far as you can reach. Don't go onto your lining panel. You don't need to go onto your seam allowance. You can just stop there because we're going to catch it with a different seam later on. So literally just from the bottom to just underneath the seam. So you can see I've just stitched from here to here. Doesn't matter about a little gap here, no problem. I'm going to catch that in afterwards. So I'll flip that back down. And now from the right side, we're going to top stitch across the top edge of the zip, 3mm or 1/8 of an inch from this top seam. And then we're going to stitch an L shape to secure this pocket in. I'm going to stitch an L shape. I shall draw it in if I can find a piece of chalk. At each side, so approximately 4 centimetres, 1.5 inches in, and 5 centimetres across. But basically, we're coming in from the top here, catching in the edge of the zip, so we're almost top stitching onto the tab. We're going just about 1 centimetre below. If you look on the back, you'll see where your stitching stopped, so about there. Just make sure you're catching it in, so something like that, and then across. Just do the same thing on the other side then. So make sure you match over there, and then in from the top, down on the edge of the zip tab, so we've got that look of being top stitched. So first, as I say, we're going to top stitch across here, and then do the L shapes and reverse L, and that catches all our pockets in, and we're nice and secure. So that's the top edge of my zip top stitch. Now I'll do the L's. There we are. So across the top of the zip, all the way along, and then my L shape on either side, which then has caught in the top edges of the pocket. You've got no gaps there for anything to fall through. This is staying loose and open because we're going to turn the bag through at the end. And we want that little bit of available pocket to be able to pull up and through. So that's our back lining complete. Before you put it to one side, just grab your front lining, so your remaining lining piece, and compare the height. Just make sure you've ended up at the same size as your original. Shouldn't be any difference. Flip it over. Got it upside down, of course. Narrow to the bottom. Yeah, there we go. We're matching exactly. If you're not matching exactly, trim the longer one very slightly. Hopefully you're not much out, but we want them to be exactly equal. So we put that back lining to one side. So we have a plain lining front. There's no pockets on that. As I say, you could add a zip pocket again in that if you wanted to. I haven't added a slip pocket in the front because I always feel that if you've got a back pocket and a front pocket, once you put your hand inside a bag, you end up putting your hand in the wrong one. So that's why I haven't included one. However, a couple of the testers asked for a slip pocket or for the measurements of a slip pocket if they wanted to add one. So if you do want to add one, I've cut 2 rectangles in my lining fabric and interfaced it. In inches, it was 7 by 4.5 inches, or in centimetres, 18 by 11 centimetres. Basically, you just need to make sure it fits neatly into there, giving room for the sides to come round a little bit. You don't need to worry about the bottom because it's a separate base on this. So I have cut those two out and I've pressed a hem on the bottom of both. I'm going to place them right sides together and I'm going to stitch around 3 sides. So I'll stitch around the top and the sides, so I'm leaving that folded bottom edge open. And then I'm going to trim the corners. Make sure you take plenty off those top corners. You don't want it squashed in. And then I shall turn that through. You can use this to add a slip pocket to any bag. So I'll just go to the ironing board and give that a press. That's pressed neatly. And now I'm going to top stitch the top edge. So that's not the open bottom edge. Top edge with 1 or 2 lines of stitching. Close to the edge. So that's our pocket complete. All we need to do now is attach it. Trim that up. So grab that back lining again. Make sure you've got it in the right orientation. So the X is to the bottom, the narrow piece. So top stitching to the top. Position that centrally on there. Just eyeball that. Grab a pin. Pin it in place. I don't know if it's perfect, but it'll be absolutely fine. Nobody will be sticking their head in their bag to check it. And then I'm going to top stitch down the sides and bottom to attach. 3mm or 1/8 inch from the edge. Yeah, so you can do that with any bag. If you want to make it credit card size, to make credit card pockets, you can do. Totally up to you. If you want to divide the pocket, you just need to do another line of stitching. So let's do that. I'll put it there so I can put pens in one side and credit cards in the other. And it's as simple as that. There we go. So we're getting a pen in there. It'd have to be a short pen, wouldn't it? But you know what I mean. Whatever you want to put in there. So a bigger bag, you can segregate it up more. But there is a slip pocket to work for any bag. That's our front lining complete too. So now we're ready to attach the base to the lining, and it's just the same method as we did with the outer. So if I grab that piece back that you've just put the pocket on, mark the centre point, little nick. And here's my base for the outer and lining. Remember, we've already trimmed that down. If you haven't, do it now. Mark the centre point of that, both sides. It's going really dark here. I don't know if you can hear that rain. We are in Manchester, UK. It's always raining. So my base piece B, I'm going to lay that right side down on top of my front lining, which is right side up. So the right sides together, matching my centre marks. Measure it both sides. I'll just put it on cutting mat to make sure it's even. Maybe a little bit that way. And then clip it in place. And then we're going to do the same with this. We're going to finish 1 centimetre from the end, or 3/8 of an inch from the end on both sides. Again, I didn't mark it on, so let's mark it on now. So we'll do the same thing and stitch from line to line. So leaving that seam allowance amount free of stitching both edges, both sides. Trim. And then once again, lift it up, grab my scissors, lift it up and trim underneath to the point we finish sewing. So we're just not trimming, we're just snipping to the point we finish sewing, just like we did on the outer. Turn it over. It is easier to do it that way. It's just very hard to illustrate it in a photograph. So we're cutting the outer body, we're not cutting the base. So that's one side attached. So then I'll repeat to attach to the back lining. So back lining, right side up. This is the bottom edge because it's got my cross on, my zips up here. Open up this one and match the centres. Again, make sure it's equal, and also line up the sides of each of these pieces, which is even more important than matching up the centre points at this point. And same thing again, stitch with my 1 centimetre seam allowance from line to line. I've got too many bits and pieces here, put those there for a minute. Trimity trim. Got a few danglers. And now we'll stitch the side seams, again just the same as the outer. So line up your side seams, you can fold it across the base if you need to. This is why they need to match in height exactly. So if they don't match exactly in height, trim a little bit off the top of one of them. It's not the end of the world. So we'll stitch those with a 1 centimetre seam allowance again, both sides. And don't forget your snips. I forgot my snips in this side, didn't I? We're snipping the lining, not the base. I forgot to do that. So just up to where our stitching ended on the base. Sorry about that. So we're going to box the box bottoms. Our pocket's still loose there, still open. So let's box those box bottoms. Press your lining side seams open if you can before you start. I won't for speed, but really it does make a big difference. Everything sits so much prettier if you press all the way through. Or press them by hand. I'll put a clip in just to hold it there. So I know it's open. It is important. I'm just being lazy, aren't I? Okay, we just held those open. So now we're going to box those box bottoms exactly the same. Just match them up, open up the base panel, and then the side will lie on top like that. As long as you've done all the seam allowances as planned, it will fit exactly. So that's one side. Do a second line of stitching if you want to. Let's box the other one. Just open it out and it should fall nicely in line. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I've just stitched those from corner to corner or edge to edge. As I say, do a second line of stitching if you want to. I've done one on the outer. So it all helps trim up anything. And that's our lining finished, and we're ready to attach our lining to our outer. So before we start, we're going to keep the outer inside out, but we want to turn the lining the right way out. So I always do it this way because you can tell whether your lining fits or not when you drop it inside your bag. If you do it the other way, when you have the lining on the outside when you're attaching them together, you don't know, the lining's tighter than the outer, so you don't know whether it fits properly. So it's always best to do it with the lining inside the bag so you can see. Look how pretty that is. Oh, how nice. So number one, open that zip. You won't be able to turn your bag through, otherwise you'll be stuck. And then I'm going to slip the lining into the outer. So here's my front. because it's got my badge on it. And the zip pocket is the back lining. So I want that to the other side. So the zip's going in towards the back of the bag. Zip of the lining. So I'm going to pop that right in and nestle it in there. I've got a couple of clips there already, so I'm just going to clip those at the side seams and nowhere else at the moment. Have a look at that zip, by the way, and make sure that it's lying flat against your bag. Push it down. You're pushing those D-rings down as well. Can you see? You want those still veering into the bag. So I'll put a clip in them if you want to. Just to hold them there. They want to be flat. You don't want any twists in them. And then let's get back to that side seam. Zip inside. Push down inside. Your handles are down inside. Side seams open. And let's line it up with the top edge. Clip it in place. Yeah, so that's how we're looking. So we just want to go all the way around the top and clip it in place. So just a few things to remember. Your lining zip pocket should remain fully open. Your outer and your lining are right sides facing. Your handles are tucked down well out of the way. Your strap carriers are down into the bag. But these little nubs that we left over the top are stuck up proud over the top of the bag. We want to make sure they stand up at right angles. Don't let them skew to one side. Our zip tail we've already dealt with. That's falling away inside and it's not twisted. The seam allowances are pressed open at the top edge to reduce bulk. And I'm going to go all the way around, clipping it in place with loads of clips. I want to make sure it all fits neatly at this top edge. If it doesn't, it's not a problem. You can go back in and just, I'd say, adjust your lining. You know, put an extra little tweak in your lining or let out a seam allowance a tiny bit if you need to. Try not to fiddle with your outer once it's all made, because the more you mess with it, the untidier it gets. Whereas your lining you can disguise. Just fiddling with my zip there, making sure it's flat. Veering inwards, downwards. So we're all clipped in position. Double check those seam allowances are open that I was trying to squeak back together. Yeah. Right, and there's a whole list. We've already been through it there, but there's a list in the PDF document of check this, check that, double check this, just to make sure everything is covered before you sew. So there we are. So using my zipper foot, I'm going to stitch all the way around the whole top edge with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can follow your way along the zip teeth. You know, you can feel the zip teeth underneath. I like to stitch from the outside because obviously that is the side you're going to see. But you can only really do that if you can take the, use the free arm of your machine, which I will do. But again, it's not a problem. You can stitch from the inside of the bag if you don't have an available free arm of the machine. Let me change to a zipper foot. Now we have a stitch all the way around. Now there's no problem if you feel it's not straight or you've got any wibbles in it. You can just go around it again. It's no problem at all. Just get a bit closer to your zip and all is good. Now I'm going to put my hand in and turn the bag through. So here's my pocket. Open. Hope you let the zip open inside, and then we're just going to pull that through a bit at a time. It's not a bad one. I mean, I've got more stiffener in here than you should have on your knees, so that's gone through absolutely fine. The exciting bit, the big reveal. You've still got a chance to put a little bit more stiffener in the bottom. Should you want more in the bottom, you can always add a little bit. Go push that in. And there we go. That's my bag nearly finished. So I'll just go and give that a little press with a pressing cloth, and then we can take a look at it before we finish it. So I've given it a ladle press. Not too much. I used a pressing cloth, obviously, because it's vinyl. I just did the top edge and the top at the side just to make sure it's flat before I top stitch it. But before we do that, we shall close the pocket inside. So open your bag, put your hand in that zip pocket and pull out the lining. Yeah, and then clip the edges together. Got a few threads there. Let me get rid of those before I start. Yeah, so that's my pocket clipped. So I'm just going to stitch along the edge there to close it. 3mm or 1/8 inch from the edge. I'm still working on the free arm of the machine here, but there's no need to. It's just because it was off, and I know I'm going to take it off later anyway. So that's closed. I can tuck that back in now and zip up the pocket. Push the corners right in. So that's our pocket finished and the bag closed. Next, we want to top stitch the top edge of the bag. So you can do it from the outside of the bag or the inside of the bag. I find it easy to do it from the outside of the bag because obviously you can see where you're stitching. If you don't have a free arm, if you can't take off the bed of your machine and you don't have a free arm, you can stitch from the inside, or you can turn it inside out and still stitch it from the inside, if that makes sense. So I'm going to stitch that about 3mm or 1/8 inch from the edge all the way along. A couple of things to remember is I have just changed my bobbin thread, just in case there wasn't quite enough, because there's nothing worse than getting halfway through the top stitching at the end of a bag and running out of bobbin thread. In fact, I'll check my top thread as well. Yeah, that's fine. And get hold of your Hump jumper too, because you might need that going over your little strap carriers if you've put them on. Now, if you find it is a little bit thick here, if you maybe use something that's a lot thicker than I have, don't worry about top stitching. You can skip, do your top stitching over the front and the back, and you can just skip that inch there. Don't worry about it. It won't make any difference. If you wanted to, you could put a rivet or two in it afterwards, but it's absolutely fine. Just top stitch front and back and leave a gap there. So where shall I start? I'll start here. Hold your zip tail up and out of the way, by the way. So I'm going to be stitching over it like this, and the zip tail will be up here. I don't want to catch that in. I'll start there. Keep your handles down and out of the way, and your zip up and out of the way. There we go, that's our bag top stitched. Lovely. I didn't even need the hoop jumper there, that's good. So the next step is to add our metal zip end just to finish off that zip. So I've got a very small zip end actually. I'm going to have to fold that zip up, but that's fine. It's nice to be folded up in there. We've got the screw on the end of there. I've got a magnetic screwdriver just so I don't lose it. So close your main zip fully and measure and mark, get some chalk, a distance 4 centimetres or 1.5 inches from where the zip emerges from the bag. There is nothing worse than leaving a long zip tail. Please don't do it. People complain that they don't like zip tails on bags, but then they've got this huge zip tail hanging down, and I wouldn't like it either. We want to clip it as close as we can to there, so it almost disappears into the look of the bag. You don't see it because of the D-rings. It's much prettier and it's easier to tuck in and pull out. And I've also got a video discussing that very thing and why we need them on my YouTube channel. So do take a look at that if you have feelings about zip tails. So let's measure that. So it's emerging here. So chop it about there. So we want it as short as possible, but so you've still got room to handle the zip and sew across it if you want to secure it. So scissors, I'll have to get good scissors because my old ones are over there. Right, so let's just chop it, make sure it's nice and straight. There we are, nice and short. And then I'm going to shove that under the machine and just stitch a couple of lines of stitching over it just for security. You could use a bit of glue, a bit of fray check, anything you want. You can also give it a singe if you want to. All optional extra security measures. Okay, so let's just give it a trial run first, make sure we can fit it in easily enough. So I'm going to fold back the ends, or the zip tape. I'm going to push it behind, and then I'm going to push my zip end on. I would normally add a little dab of glue here just to make sure, but again, it's all completely optional. So have a look at it. It's not fixed at the moment. Make sure you're happy with it. Make sure it's sitting straight. We don't want your zip curved off to one side. You can just have another go and position it correctly if so. But that looks all right actually. So I'm just going to screw that on. Make sure it's in right to the end. Yep. And then I'll turn it upside down and screw it on. I'm going to stand up because I won't be able to see it otherwise. So there's my little screw hole. So don't be scared of metal zip ends. They are really, really handy and often easier to apply than actually stitching one on. So that's my zip end applied. So now that can stay out. So you can see once your D-rings are up and your straps on, you're not going to be able to see that anyway. Or you can tuck it in, and it's easy to tuck in because it's just there and short. So whichever suits. I quite like them out anyway. I quite like the look of them. So there we are. That's our zip end on. Now let's make the crossbody strap. So let's make our optional crossbody strap. I'm using 32mm wide, that's 1¼ inch wide webbing. You can use whatever width of webbing you choose. I find cotton or nylon seatbelt webbing are ideal for bag making. I do prefer them to polyester webbing. They seem to give a more professional look. The polyester webbing does tend to crease up a bit and hold the creases. You're also going to need an adjustable or slider and 2 swivel clasps. And both of those are at the same width as my webbing, so 32mm or 1¼ inches wide. If you're using a different width of webbing, choose your slider and swivel clasps to match your chosen width. So I've cut a 153cm or 60-inch length of webbing. I'm using my matching adjustable and swivel hooks. I'm going to singe the end of my webbing to stop it from fraying. So you can do that with polyester or with nylon, as I'm using here today. If you're using cotton, you'll have to zigzag stitch it to neaten it. There we go, easy fix. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab my adjuster buckle and I'm going to thread one end of my webbing through the adjuster buckle, over the bar, over the adjuster bar and back down the other side, and I'm going to pull through about 5 centimetres or 2 inches. So I've folded that back on itself and I'm going to clip that in place. And then you can stitch either a box shape or 2 lines of stitching to secure. I find it's easy to do 2 lines of stitching. I put a zipper foot on my machine because it allows me to get my needle or my line of stitching closer to the metal work. Now, if you do have a more powerful machine, you might choose to fold that under again, just to give a slightly neater look. But to be honest, I usually just leave it if it's nylon. It's quite tidy anyway, and I'm going to enclose that within the loop afterwards. So let's stitch that. I tend to pull it out and snip it off so I don't get thread nesting behind. You could also hold on to the threads to start with to avoid that. So you can see, because I held those threads there and then pulled them out afterwards, I haven't got any nesting behind. Okay, tidy up. So I'm going to grab one of my swivel hooks and I'm going to thread it on so that the hook is facing upwards on the tidy side. So I've got my seam underneath. So grab that, thread it on. So I'll just pull that close up to my adjuster buckle. Flip it over and grab your raw end again, and I'm going to thread that. Make sure there's no loops in it. I'm going to thread that back up through the adjuster buckle and down over the bar over the other side. So you can see what I've done there is I've enclosed that seamed edge underneath. So I can pull that through. It's quite tight. There's my tidy side. So that's hidden away inside my seam. So all I've got to do now is put the other end on. So pull that through. Make sure that your loop is on the top. Your hook is on the top, shall we say. So I've kept my tidy side, or my tidy sides together. Pull 5 centimetres or a couple of inches through. Clip in place. And again, I'm going to stitch that with 2 lines of stitching. Trim up. No thread nests. Nice and tidy. So I'm ready to attach that to my Totini tote. So let's attach our strap to our bag. This is starting to look really good now, isn't it? So as I said, the strap is completely optional. You don't have to add it. You can just leave off the crossbody strap and the D-rings and just have it as a little tote bag. So that's our bag finished, apart from adding our optional little scarf. So a little mini scarf embellishment. So let's put the bag to one side and just make that. It takes a mere minute. So I've got my mini scarf pieces, and that's pieces K, and I'm going to lay them right sides together. So you can just leave them square, or you can trim the ends into a sort of point, which I've just done here. Totally up to you. So line up all your edges, and you'll see I've just drawn on here a couple of lines because I want to make a point. So I'm doing it both at the same side, and I've come in about 3.5 inches at the top. So just trim those off. As I say, you can just leave it square if you prefer. I'm going to stitch all the way around the sides with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. But I'm going to leave a gap of about 8 inches or 20 centimetres on the long edge at the bottom. Doesn't really matter about the size, it's just long enough for you to turn it through. Just get past the points. And we'll seal it there afterwards. So let's stitch all the way around there. If you're not good at eyeballing the seam allowances when you get to the corners, you can draw it on first. It doesn't matter. It'll make no difference. It'll be hidden inside. And I'm going to trim that up, particularly these pointy ends, because those are going to be crammed into the end. So we want them as small as possible on the seam allowances. And come right back here. Put a couple of snips of your corners, trim it down. Don't trim your edge where you're going to turn it through. So I'm going to take that to the ironing board. I'm not going to turn it through until I get there. First of all, I'm going to press a hem here and here, just so that once it's turned through, it's easy to match the edges. So just turn your hem, turn your seam allowance along that line there, along your closing gap, and then turn it through and give it a press. So I've turned that through and pressed it. As I was pressing it, I'm thinking, gosh, this is thicker than I've been doing in the past and the previous ones. I've realised I interfaced it. Don't interface this little scarf. And the cutting instructions say just the lining fabric on its own. You do need a thinner fabric. Don't interface it like me. So it is a bit more chunky than it would normally be. But let's finish that off. It'll be fine. So I'm going to top stitch to close it just along here. I mean, it's up to you. You can top stitch all the way around if you like. You can try that. So I've top stitched that all the way around rather than just along the turning gap. Totally optional, up to you. Now I'm going to grab my spring gate O-ring. So I'm using a 1-inch one, but anything you've got hanging around really, you need it quite large because it needs to fit onto the strap of the grab handle of the bag. You can use a split ring if you prefer, or you can just tie that right onto the grab handle. I'm going to use the gate ring because it means I can use it for other bags easily. I can remove it and put it on. So I'm just going to push one end through, make a loop, or push 2 ends through, make a loop, and then grab those 2 ends and pull them through just to secure it in place. So flatten them out, and then it's up to you. As I say, this one is a little bit bulky because I've put the interface in. Don't do that. Totally up to you. You can have it this way up or this way up on the bag. Actually, I'm going to turn that around so both my points are facing in the same direction, because that's how I prefer it. Again, all those personal choices. So there's my little scarf. Grab my bag. And then I'm just going to open and flop it on. Very cute. As I say, this one is, it definitely does need to be without interfacing, but you get the gist. So looking very cute. Well, I'm absolutely loving how this Mora version turned out. Honestly, it probably doesn't even need this extra interfacing that I put in. I'd leave that out next time and just go with the faux as it is. I really hope you enjoyed making it with me today. Just zip it up, toss in all your bits and bobs, and you're ready to go. And why not even add a little Lewis wallet to it? Perfectly sized for this bag, and they go so well together. Oh, here's a fun idea. Make a few different scarves to hang on so you can change up the look whenever you want to. or whip one up as a gift. It's a super quick sew, perfect for selling at craft fairs or even as a sweet mummy and me set for little ones. Want to mix it up a bit more? Try a bold print. This is my next holiday bag. So lots of different fabrics you can try it in. Or swap the fabric handles for webbing. Every choice gives a totally different personality to the bag. And don't forget, if you've got any questions about this pattern or any of my others, just hop onto the Facebook group and ask away. I love seeing your creations, so please do share your photographs of all your finished bags there. I can't wait to see them. So, what are you waiting for? Go sew!